A few weeks ago, the UN Geneva Library and the Geneva Center organized this discussion group entitled Leadership in Modern Multilateralism. According to the panel, multilateralism is the most logical approach to the challenges the world is facing in our time of fast-paced globalization.
Yet, many people have lost confidence, not only in their leaders and governments, but also in global institutions, including the United Nations. Multilateralism is challenged by nationalist and isolationist politics of fear and resentment. We find ourselves at a crossroads today, at a moment in time in which two very different visions of the world compete with each other. One optimistic, focused on everyone's success, the other pessimistic, focused only on one's own advantage. Two different stories, two different narratives about who we are and how should we respond.
Multilateralism is a very multifaceted theme. That's why we thought we cut this interview in two pieces. So this is part one of the interview. Professor Dr. Alfred de Zayas, a Catholic, an American lawyer and historian, and independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order, expressed his opinion on the subject matter. Now, there are a few definitions of multilateralism. Miles Kahler, for example, a political scientist, defined it as international governance or global governance of the many. Isn't that exactly what so many people fear or are opposed to, that the United Nations could become a global, a world government? Can that happen?
Well, I don't think it's a good definition. I think that multilateralism implies multilateral diplomacy for peace, for cooperation, for the sustainable development goals, for positive things, but never as globalism or as world government. What we're talking about is cooperation on the basis of consensus. That is, states agree to cooperate. The culture of dialogue, the culture of multilateralism is something that should be promoted, and indeed, our Pope, Franciscus, he has always been an advocate of multilateralism, and he said so in so many words. You remember his speech to the diplomatic corps in the Vatican, beginning 2019, reminding them that it's exactly 100 years since that first attempt at multilateralism was carried out, the foundation of the League of Nations.
Professor de Zayas admonished to read the small print of issues in the context of multilateralism, such as the Global Compact for Migration. Which sounds like a good plan to regulate, to control, but there are many countries already that, like Austria and Hungary and so forth, that are opposed to that.
With good reason. Read how to implement Goal 17. The moment you bring in the big stick of criminal law, that leads to censorship and it leads to self-censorship. So it's dangerous. But that does not mean that multilateral diplomacy in the context of migration is not necessary. Of course it is.
This panel speaker expressed his belief that giving the UN, for example, a handle on domestic policies would be perhaps not a good idea.
As multilateralism includes domestic policy evaluation in its purview, it must also become increasingly people-driven. In fact, the current outburst of populism springs from the feeling that ordinary people are kept out of the search for solutions that concern them to problems that Kofi Annan used to call problems without passports. And I refer to pandemics, to environmental degradation, non-proliferation, immigration, etc.
The panelists agreed that despite mounting nationalism and criticism, that there is no valid alternative to international cooperation, multilateralism, and that it must be driven by responsible leadership personalities.